This is the Burning Presales Podcast. Tony Francetic, who is a solution consultant leader at Thomson Reuters and a passionate presales thought leader, will answer today's question. So the question is, how do you increase presales influence in your organization? There's a ton to unpack there, but let's leave it simple for now, and then I'll pepper you with questions if I feel inspired to bring something up. But how do you increase pre-sales influence in an organization?
No, and that's, it's super timely as far as the question goes, because that's kind of the state of pre-sales right now is in that growth phase. And if I think about like what's the challenge to overcome, it's the old school methodology that pre-sales just does demos.
Yeah.
And when businesses start to recognize where that influence really impacts a customer, or a department, right? You can't just say sales, and it always is at the heart of it is sales. We want to influence and drive revenue, but that's not just by delivering demos to the sales teams.
Yeah.
You think about like where pre-sales impacts an organization. Well, to be really effective at pre-sales, you got to have a good handle on the marketing strategy so the messaging is consistent.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's got to be a feedback loop with that marketing team to make sure that the campaigns they're producing are in line with what the customer segment is saying, what they want, what's important to them, what are the big value propositions. That transitions into a customer proposition squad that talks about, bundling and packaging and what's that proposition statement that sales are going to be utilizing. Well, that same level of influence should be present in the customer proposition division from pre-sales. Take it a step further into product management and development. You talk about roadmaps and good pre-sales teams, staffs, individuals. They need to make sure that they know what's that long-term roadmap and strategy for the product so they can position it well with the customer. Well, very much the same way in those feedback loops, bringing in a pre-sales team on a semi-frequent cadence to talk about what are customers saying that they like, what are saying that they don't like, and then review that with the roadmap and influence those features or functionalities on the future roadmap where it's most impactful. If it's a need today and it's not on the roadmap for another year, then maybe you reprioritize the roadmap.
Yeah.
All of those things are going to drive revenue growth, because if you open up the funnel of marketing, that's more sales opportunity, right? If you influence the product to be more enticing for a customer, that's going to influence the potential revenue growth. If it's how do we package and put our solutions together to position for the sales floor, that's going to influence revenue growth. So I think the heart of it in any sales organization is, where do you look at how do you drive revenue? Pre-sales is at the heart of all of it.
Yeah. Do you see, I've wondered about this because we've been toying with this idea, and I've shared this with other people, so maybe this is rehash. I apologize if anyone has heard me talk about this too often, but this notion that pre-sales and what they do, what they offer is now way more in demand across the funnel than it ever has been. So we're kind of reaching this point where internally you have marketing teams and, like you said, sales teams and customer success teams and product teams clamoring for what the pre-sales team has traditionally kind of delivered, and they're trying to amplify that and get a lot more from them. At the same time, you have buyers who want that kind of content as well. The kinds of things that pre-sales people, sales engineers, solution consultants traditionally provide are the things that are in highest demand. And so I do see some organizations evolving to accommodate that increased demand. And they're adding roles to the pre-sales organization at the director and vice president level. And then you have organizations that just aren't doing that. And it seems odd to me because it's such a kind of a critical function, increasingly so. Is it that, is it because it's nested in sales and sales leadership either doesn't have that vision for what pre-sales is doing? Because I've certainly come across that. I've met my fair share of sales leaders whose entire focus, or at least 98% of it, is on their reps and their team and their process and their quota. And pre-sales is kind of on the side, even though they're brought into almost every discussion and that they're the technical experts. And it seems like there's this odd relationship. So I don't know. Have you seen that play out with people in the industry that you're connected with? And I guess, how do you overcome that? Because it seems like there needs to be a switch that has to be flipped with some of these leaders to start to embrace that maybe pre-sales as a function needs, not to be cliche, but that seat at the table, more strategic executive, maybe ownership and oversight. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and there's other pre-sales leaders and areas that I kind of engage with and talk through some of this exact same discussion. And I think it's, a lot of tech companies specifically, if you're looking at like, how do we position our own solutions to our customers and what do we suggest they do? It's adapt and move with the times. And it's funny because some of the organizations that I talk to, they don't take their own advice.
Yeah.
Right. We still operate in a mode of, a former time where, and I had an old boss that actually said this to me too. And that's how they were trained. You get a body, you put them in a demo and let them do what they do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't ever any more than that, because you're right. It was a motivating factor to drive sales forward. Pre-sales is a component of the sales process. And there's no doubt to that. Like, it's absolutely what we're there. I'd say the core part of my job, my team, is to make sure that they move sales cycles forward. That's the job. But the other parts of what they have to know to be effective in that job, and the amount of client touch points and interactions that they have, to leave that on the table for the rest of the organization, to me, is just, you're losing an opportunity to engage with those people who are actively discussing our products or your products with an interested customer, right?
Yeah.
So they're open. We know about competitors and what do they like about what they're using today, but what do they don't like, and what do you have that they like? What do you have that they don't like, and why this doesn't all fit together? That's so valuable in terms of just the volume of touch points that pre-sales has, especially depending on the size of the sales organization. That leaving it all on the table, to me, is just the biggest misstep. And that, to me, is where, to your point, what's the light switch to flick to get that to happen?
Yeah.
Bring that back to focus, like show some of the value. And I know that's a hard thing too, because then you get into the whole compensation conversation and what do you get paid for what you bring to the table? But man, you start to show and advocate with some of those other divisions about how you can bring that information and leverage it to benefit the greater company. It's kind of it. If it doesn't come to fruition after that, you're in a tough spot. But to me, that's the trigger. You got to put some onus out there. You got to show what your value is to be able to kind of have the recognition come a little later. But put some trust in the rest of the company and put it out there. Be a leader for the change.
I'm going to ask you in a second for any recommendations you have on the first step a pre-sales maybe practitioner can take. Because I'm sure of my hundreds of thousands of listeners and followers. I'm just kidding. Probably just our company and a few customers. No, it'd be nice for anyone that does hear this to maybe get your perspective on, like, what's the first step I can take after listening to this and kind of feeling the fire. Hey, I need to do something to elevate my role, my function across the organization. I'm going to schedule a meeting with my sales leader and say this or do this. I'd love to get your thoughts there, but just one quick interjection. A couple of years ago, I noticed that somebody had done an audit of I think it was just tech companies. It might've been a little bit more broad than that, but they looked at the rise of the role of the CRO, and there had been a year over year, a 50% increase in companies that had hired specifically a chief revenue officer, not just to own sales, but to own more of the revenue funnel, and sometimes including marketing. So it was like start to finish, from marketing all the way to CS. And I thought, if this is a trend that continues, and I have no insight into whether or not that's the case, I do see a lot of more organizations hiring the CRO position. It seems like this would be the prime opportunity for pre-sales as a function for any organization that is thinking in terms of a chief revenue officer to create that executive sponsorship level within the pre-sales organization, because they do have this demand across the funnel that seems to fit all of those different revenue functions. And so I don't know, something to monitor closely, but I'm encouraged by that. I think as an industry, we're going to see more and more elevation of this function within organizations, just as organizations start to realize they have to look at revenue more holistically and they can't silo everything. Side note, maybe we could have a separate conversation on that, but back to my original question. So, somebody jumps off this podcast when it eventually does go live. What's the first thing they should do? You had mentioned, be an advocate for that change. What can they do to be that advocate? What have you seen work?
Well, I think make sure that you've got your own team behind it. And I think the first step is creating the vision behind it. What are you going to do to get your team on board to basically take on some more responsibility?
Yeah.
For me personally, I know that's been my challenge, is kind of walking that tightrope of, advocating for the team and recognition and compensation and all the things that go for like the highly successful pre-sales team, at the same time asking more of them when they're already in that role where it's a busy role, especially in a sales division for a tech company. So I think that you've got to get your team on board first, get them to see the vision of where this is going to benefit them in long term. And then, it's got to start with the sales organization. It depends on where your org structure is. If you're under sales, talk to that VP of sales and set the vision there, because then it's either the sales VP or lead or whatever the title is going to be, starting to make some connections and introductions and build relationships with the other divisions, or depending on where your role is in the structure, engage with those other leaders too, right? Because every other division, whether it's marketing or product or sales enablement or customer propositions, customer success, any other things that are there that can have this influence benefit them, offer up, join a team meeting, start something where they can say, well, what value could this bring? Brainstorm with the team, because I'm blessed by having a great team behind me, and they're the ones that do the work, so I put all the credit on them. But I wouldn't be able to make any bit of those relationships valuable without the insights and experience and knowledge that the team comes from behind me. So to me, it's getting the team on board first, then getting your sales org understanding what the vision is, and then branch out.
Love it. Thanks, Tony.